Chris Cook there, and we asked the BMA and the government to come in tonight to respond to the criticisms made, but they were unavailable. Joining us now, though, junior Dr. Rachel Clarke, who's been a vocal campaigner for strike action. Dr. Clarke, thanks very much for coming in. And a lot of people understand that there are junior doctors, there are medics who, frankly, have been pushed to the end of their tether by all this and have reached for the nuclear option. But fundamentally, it's very hard for you to sell to the public this change of heart when you seem so close to a deal so recently.
To some extent, I absolutely agree with that. It's how do we, as doctors, forsake our patients for 5 days at a stretch? And I know that every day I went on strike in the preceding year, I cried on my way to the picket line. I felt guilty. I felt as though I was doing something that I absolutely did not want to do. And I think that every individual doctor who goes on strike from September the 12th is going to go through all those emotions as well, because fundamentally we feel as though what we're doing goes against the grain of our ingrained work ethic. But when questioning the proportionality of a strike, I think you have to do that in the context of assessing the potential harm of the strike, and there is definite harm from the strike because we know that patients are going to have their elective operations cancelled, for example. But you have to assess that against the harm of the action that you're trying to avoid.
And that's totally understandable, but it's a slightly different point to the one I've made, which is that fundamentally it is very hard for you to turn around to the public and say, you know how we were very close to that deal and we were all going to go with that deal. We're not now, for exactly the same reasons that we could have made 6 months earlier.
So I think that that question rests on a fundamental misunderstanding of what this dispute is about for grassroots junior doctors. There has been a year of negotiation, and you're absolutely right in that interview. One of my BMA representatives said they thought that the final deal was a good one. I never thought that deal was a good one, and nor did a great many of my fellow grassroots doctors.
But you were prepared at one point to support it, were you not?
It is one thing to think that something is the best of a bad possible set of options on the table. That's not the same as supporting it. Fundamentally,
but you would have, at that point, you would have voted yes. And we just heard from Ellen McCourt, the one you raised, who said, we believe it's safe for patients, safe for doctors, and it values the workforce. Now, why would her mind have suddenly changed?
So to answer that point, for the last year, the BMA has sought to negotiate a new contract which will deliver a 7-day NHS cost neutrally. That was the government's stipulation. They said, we insist that not only will your new contract be cost neutral, it must somehow nonetheless deliver these fantastic new services that we so support and are committed to at the weekend in the absence of any funds and any staff. Now, we know that not only do junior doctors feel deeply, deeply anxious about the idea that we can be stretched more thinly and somehow still be safe at the weekend, we know that Jeremy Hunt's own officials in the Department of Health share that queasiness through leaked internal documents, their own risk assessments, a 5 out of 5 severity risk that there aren't enough staff or funds to deliver this policy safely.
Do you think, frankly, then, that the BMA screwed this up for all of you?
No, I don't. I wish that a year ago the BMA had called out the government on the ludicrousness.
They spent 8 days at ACAS negotiating with the government, and now they're back into what we hear as an unprecedented strike, and you've talked about the worries you have already with that. Why would the government trust any new negotiation at this point when the last one was
perhaps
reneged?
Because what you've just described is actually the democratic process. So the BMA may have delivered what they felt was the best deal that on the table.
They're out of step with their members.
Indeed, and it's ironic, isn't it? Because for this entire year, Jeremy Hunt portrayed the BMA as the radicals, the Trotskyists, the militants who are leading us all into this dreadful fight that we were too misguided to realise was extreme. Ironically enough...
And they weren't hardline enough for you?
Well, far from it. What I objected to from the outset and what I object to now is the political game playing, and Theresa May is wholly wrong when she says it's doctors who are playing games. It's the political game playing of presenting the electorate with an unfunded soundbite and pretending that that is a policy. nobody gets something for nothing. We all know that. That's why we still have the public support. It's because the public knows that if the government were really genuinely committed to safer weekends, they would fund them, they would staff them. In Oxfordshire, where I work, my local DGH, a hospital, a district general hospital in Banbury, has just closed its entire maternity service because they don't have enough junior doctors.
Do you still think, bluntly, you can win this, or will it turn into something akin to a minor strike, which is how one doctor described it to me tonight?
I think that what has to happen this week is absolutely everything humanly possible to try and prevent the strike. And I think if Jeremy Hunt had any shred of commitment to patients, literally all he needs to do is pause in position. He could have a pause. He's not saying he's rejecting the 7-day NHS, he's giving up on it. He's not losing face. He's simply saying, we must come together for patients and pause this. That's literally all he needs to do. And if he does that, the strike goes away, they're back round the table and talking. And why he's not doing that, I simply can't understand.
Dr. Clarke, thank you very much. Thanks for coming in.